I was at the top of the staircase when I heard my daughter-in-law whisper to my son, "She's too old to know how much money she has anyway." My fingers tightened around the banister as I heard my son calmly reply, "You're probably right." My name is Helen Granger, and I was 71 years old that morning when I made the quiet decision that would change the course of my entire life. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to cry or plead. I was going to let them think I was slipping, that I was soft, that I was stupid. Because what they didn't know was that I had spent over 30 years as a senior partner in a litigation firm. I knew exactly what manipulation sounded like. I knew what betrayal felt like. And more importantly, I knew how to build a case. I returned to my bedroom, knees trembling but mind sharper than it had been in years, and sat on the edge of my bed. It was Tuesday, October 10th. I remember that date the way people remembered the moment they lost everything. Because in a way, I did. My son, Brian, and his wife, Melissa, were downstairs in my kitchen drinking coffee and discussing my mental decline like I wasn't just alive, I was already irrelevant. I had suspected Melissa's intentions for months. Her visits were more frequent, her questions more invasive, her tone increasingly patronizing. But to hear Brian go along with it, to hear my own son brush off my intelligence like it had expired with my retirement, that was the wound that pierced deepest. I knew Melissa had been working on him, carefully, quietly. A story here, a concern there, planting seeds. I was sure of it. 20 minutes later, I padded downstairs in my slippers, my housecoat wrapped tightly around me. I curled my hair just enough to look tired, unkempt. "Oh, there you are, Mom," Brian said, his smile bright and fake. "We were just saying it might be time to schedule a little checkup, just to make sure everything's working as it should. I nodded slowly, eyes wide with feigned confusion. "Oh, well, that sounds sensible. I do forget things sometimes." Melissa shot Brian a satisfied glance and offered me tea like I was a guest in my own home. That evening, while they took a walk to get some air, I went into Brian's office. The password on his laptop was still his college football jersey number. Predictable. I opened his browser history and my heart went cold. He searched symptoms of Alzheimer's, signs of cognitive decline in elderly parents, and, most tellingly, how to initiate conservatorship in the state of Massachusetts. That alone was enough to confirm my fears, but it got worse. In his email folder labeled Home, I found a thread between him and Melissa stretching back nearly 2 months. She detailed worrying incidents, all fabrications. She wrote that I'd confused my checkbook with my recipe journal, that I'd accused the delivery man of stealing my keys, that I'd forgotten the names of my own grandchildren. Every one of them a lie. But reading Brian's responses, I could tell he believed her. She didn't come at him with claws. She dripped poison slowly until it seemed like love. I printed every email, every browser screenshot, every financial record I could find. I created a folder with tabs, color-coded like we used to do at the firm. If they wanted war, I would give it to them, politely, patiently, and perfectly documented. On Thursday, Melissa moved to the next stage of her plan. She called the card group I played with every week and canceled for me, telling them it had just become too much for my energy. Then she told Lena, my housekeeper of nearly 15 years, that she was no longer needed. When Lena called me sobbing, I felt something in me ignite. "Miss Helen, I would never take anything from you. Melissa said you suspected I'd been stealing, but I swear to God." "I know you wouldn't," I said quietly, gripping the phone. "I know. And I'm going to remember exactly who said otherwise." There was a long pause. Then Lena said, "Something else. I wasn't going to tell you because it felt like snooping, but Melissa's been in your desk, taking pictures of your files. She said you wanted her to organize your affairs, but it didn't sit right." I thanked her, heart pounding. Finally, a witness. A week later, Melissa floated the idea of getting a second opinion on my cognitive health. She said it casually while making grilled chicken. Dr. Levinson is so old-fashioned. I heard about a specialist, Dr. Camden. He's much more current, has a real understanding of elder care. That does sound smart, I said, sipping wine. At my age, I can't be too careful. I smiled as if I already knew who Dr. Camden was. I'd looked him up the second she mentioned his name 3 weeks prior. He was a neurologist stripped of his license for misdiagnosing wealthy seniors with dementia in cases that later led to family-controlled financial power transfers. He'd been reinstated under heavy scrutiny. But what Melissa didn't know was that he was deeply in debt, had recently gone through a divorce, and was known for bending to pressure for a price. The appointment was scheduled for Tuesday. Melissa drove me there in a cardigan and pearls, playing the doting caregiver. She even brought a folder of observations to share with the doctor. When we arrived, the office looked like a hotel lobby, then a clinic. Everything was pristine, too pristine. Dr. Camden smiled a little too brightly. "Mrs. Granger, how are we feeling today?" "A little nervous, but that's probably normal, right? I spent 10 minutes looking for my glasses yesterday. They were in my apron pocket." Melissa smiled with exaggerated concern. "She's been having more incidents like that. She lost her purse last week, left the back door open. She's not herself." He began his evaluation with basic questions. What year was it? Who was president? Draw a clock. Repeat 3 words. Every answer I gave, he found a way to undermine. "You hesitated. That's not quite the sequence. Let's try again, shall we?" I recognized the manipulation instantly. This wasn't an evaluation. It was a script, a performance. Melissa's notes peeked out from under his clipboard. After we left, Melissa said gently, "Whatever the results are, just know Brian and I only want what's best for you." But when she reached over to squeeze my hand, I noticed her fingers trembling. She was nervous, scared even. The report arrived Friday. Melissa read it aloud at dinner. "Mild cognitive impairment, probable early onset dementia, and signs of declining executive function." She daubed her eyes. "We just want to make sure you're safe, Helen." Brian looked shattered, but I saw it now. He didn't know half of what she orchestrated. Later that night, while pretending to read, I heard their voices in the kitchen. "With this report, we can move forward with the legal steps. It usually takes a few months, but we've already got the paperwork started." "It still feels wrong," Brian whispered, "taking control of her life like this. Do you want to see her give it all away to some scam? Do you want to lose your inheritance?" Melissa's voice was sharp, impatient. "Helen has nearly $3 million in accounts, and this house is worth close to $1 million. We're securing our future, not stealing." That was the moment I realized how little Melissa thought of me. She believed my age made me blind, my trust made me weak. But she was about to find out how dangerous experience can be when paired with betrayal. I returned to my room that night and stared at the ceiling, heartbeat calm and purposeful. I didn't sleep. I planned. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about reclaiming my name, my dignity, and my family. And when I was done, Melissa wouldn't just lose control, she'd lose everything. The following Monday, I began what I called Operation Dimming Light. I shuffled into the kitchen in my worn housecoat, stared blankly at the coffee maker, and poured orange juice into my cereal. When Melissa walked in, I pretended not to notice her until she cleared her throat. "Everything all right, Helen?" she asked, her voice dipped in fake concern. "Just fine, dear," I said, blinking slowly. "I forgot if it was breakfast or lunch." I could see the satisfaction flicker in her eyes, just for a second. Every clumsy movement I made that week was part of the act. I misplaced my knitting needles, asked Brian the same question twice during dinner, and even pretended I couldn't remember the name of our street. Meanwhile, Behind the mask, I was assembling an arsenal. I pulled every bank statement from the past 12 months. I flagged three unusual charges: a $14,000 withdrawal labeled home care services I never received, a $9,200 check for medical equipment that never arrived, and most alarming, a recurring transfer to an unfamiliar account under the name MR Holdings. When I contacted my bank, I learned Brian had been added as an authorized financial agent using a limited power of attorney I had allegedly signed. I hadn't. I knew exactly where that came from. Melissa had slipped it between insurance forms 2 months ago, urging me to sign before lunch gets cold. And I had signed. That was the part that shamed me most. I'd always told my clients to read every line, yet I had let my guard down because I never expected to be betrayed by my own family. That evening, Melissa made chicken pot pie. It was one of my favorites. She dished it with exaggerated cheer, constantly asking how I felt. "A little tired," I said, not touching my plate. I waited until she stepped away to collect laundry, then scraped half of it into a paper towel and flushed it. I didn't trust anything she prepared anymore. Something had changed in her eyes. She wasn't just trying to prove I was ill. She wanted to make it true. I called Robert Chen the next morning. He was a retired legal colleague I trusted implicitly. When he picked up and heard my voice, he sounded surprised but warm. "Helen, what a blast from the past. What brings you to my humble phone line?" "Trouble," I said simply. "And I need the sharpest mind I've ever practiced law beside." I told him everything: the forged documents, the corrupt doctor, the fake symptoms, the missing money, the manipulation. The more I spoke, the more solemn his voice became. "Helen, this is textbook elder abuse, and it's not just unethical, it's criminal. But we have to be precise. Massachusetts is a single-party consent state, but even so, we need hard evidence, not just suspicions. I have documents, I have emails, I even have a witness." "Then we start now," he said. "I'll refer you to someone who's helped in similar cases. His name's Julian Marks, private investigator, smart, thorough, and discreet. If anyone can catch Melissa red-handed, it's him." I contacted Julian that afternoon using my neighbor's phone. Melissa had been increasingly monitoring mine, pretending it was for safety. I met Julian in a small diner 3 towns away. He was younger than expected, sharp-eyed, and respectful. After hearing the story, he whistled. "This is a career case. The mix of financial fraud, medical conspiracy, and potential poisoning, it's layered. We'll need documentation of everything. Do not eat or drink anything prepared by her without witnesses. Don't take medications unless they're sealed and verified. From this point on, you're not just in danger of losing your estate, you may be in physical danger." I nodded. I had suspected it, but hearing it aloud made it real. That night, I pretended to fall asleep in my recliner while Melissa moved through the house like a silent thief. I heard her unlock my filing cabinet, shuffle papers, then take a photo with her phone. When she turned to glance at me, I remained perfectly still, breathing slow and shallow. She hesitated, then slipped quietly out of the room. I waited 5 more minutes before standing up and pulling the batteries from the camera she didn't know I had installed in the grandfather clock across the room. A gift from Robert. Motion sensitive, infrared, perfect angle of her snooping through my legal documents. Proof. The next morning, Melissa placed my pill organizer on the table. "I added a new supplement, something Dr. Camden recommended. Should help with memory." "That's thoughtful," I said, palming the pill instead of swallowing. Later, under my reading lamp, I examined it. It wasn't my usual medication. The shape, color, and markings didn't match. I crushed a portion and mailed it overnight to Julian with a note, "Analyze immediately." Meanwhile, Melissa's tone with me had shifted. Less condescending, more cautious. She watched me now, like she was trying to decide if I was playing her. On Thursday, she slipped. I'd gone to the front porch for air and returned to find her laptop open on the kitchen counter. She was upstairs, folding laundry, unaware. I moved quickly. Her browser was open to her email, unlocked. My hands shook, but I clicked fast. There it was, a message thread between her and Dr. Camden. Payment will be made upon completion of conservatorship process. Funds to be drawn from verified accounts as per initial agreement. And then the words that chilled me. Timeline urgent. Creditors threatening legal action. We must have access within 30 days. 30 days. That's all I had left. I photographed the entire chain, emailed it to a burner account Julian helped me create, then erased my tracks. Melissa came downstairs 10 minutes later, humming, holding a fresh dish towel. Her eyes flicked to the laptop. "Were you just in the kitchen?" "Just came in from the porch," I said breezily. "Weather's lovely." "Did you use the laptop?" she asked, almost casually. "Oh, no, I wouldn't know how. These new things confuse me. I stick to my books." Her expression softened slightly. I saw the relief settle in her shoulders. She still thought she was in control. She thought I was still dimming light. That night, Brian came home with a six-pack and seemed more tired than I'd ever seen him. We sat in the living room while Melissa tidied the kitchen. "You seem different lately, Mom," he said, not looking at me. "Melissa's worried about you. I mean, I am too." "Of course you are," I said gently. "That's natural. I'm getting older." "It's not just age. You left the stove on last week." "Or maybe someone just wanted you to think I did," I said softly. He turned to look at me, brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Just a tired woman rambling. Don't mind me." The seed was planted, and it was growing. The next day, I called Julian with an update. The pill was confirmed to contain diphenhydramine in excessive quantities, a sedative antihistamine, very risky for seniors. Long-term use could mimic signs of cognitive decline. "She was drugging me," I said quietly, slowly, subtly, trying to make the lies come true. "Yes," Julian confirmed. "This isn't just fraud anymore. This is attempted poisoning. We need to move fast." "Then I want to do it. I want to make her think I've given up. I'm going to tell her I'm ready to sign over control of my finances. But I'll do it in front of everyone, with witnesses, in a setting she can't manipulate. And then I show her what real legal power looks like." He paused. "Helen, are you sure? That could be dangerous." "So is underestimating an old woman who's been waiting 30 years for a case like this." That weekend, I put my plan in motion. I told Melissa and Brian over breakfast that I'd been thinking a lot about my situation, and maybe they were right. "It's time to admit I can't manage everything anymore," I said, stirring my tea with trembling hands for effect. "I'd like to have a small gathering to mark this transition. Just close family, maybe a few neighbors. If I'm stepping down from managing my life, I'd like to say goodbye to that part of myself properly." Melissa nearly dropped her fork. Her eyes lit up like Christmas. "Helen, that's such a wise and graceful idea, really. We'll help plan everything." Brian didn't speak. He just nodded, and for once, he didn't meet my eyes. The date was set for Saturday. I let Melissa take the lead. She made the guest list, handled the food, even sent out the invitations. She was basking in the role of the concerned, noble caregiver, earning sympathy from everyone she told about my condition. What she didn't know was that I made a few additions to that list. Robert Chen would be there, of course, along with Julian Marks and Lena, my longtime housekeeper, who agreed to help serve at the event. And then there were a few quiet guests from the Attorney General's Elder Exploitation Division, friends of Robert's, curious and cautious. That week, Melissa grew bolder. She began openly reviewing my mail before I could get to it, redirecting calls from my financial advisor, and locking my filing cabinet like I was some unruly child. I didn't protest. I even thanked her. "You're such a help, dear," I said one morning, handing her my keys. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "We just want what's best." She smiled, her voice soft and syrupy. But when she turned away, I saw her jaw tighten. She thought she was close. She thought I was breaking. That Saturday evening, I wore my favorite navy dress, the one Brian had given me on my 65th birthday. It still fit. I pinned my hair back, added a touch of rouge, and took one long breath. It was time. Guests filled the living room and kitchen. I saw familiar faces, neighbors, old friends, even Brian's coworkers. Melissa flitted about, basking in compliments about her selflessness. People praised her for stepping up. "She's so lucky to have you," someone said. "Not every daughter-in-law would do all this." "It's our duty," she replied humbly, brushing a fake tear from her cheek. When Robert and Julian arrived, I saw Melissa's expression flicker. She quickly masked it, but the unease was there. She hadn't expected them. "Helen, how lovely you look," Robert said, kissing my cheek. "You always knew how to make an entrance." "Thank you, Robert," I said calmly. "Let's make it one to remember." Once everyone had a drink and the room was full of chatter, I moved to the fireplace. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "Tonight is special for me. As many of you know, my health has been a topic of concern. Some believe I'm no longer capable of managing my affairs. Tonight, I'd like to address that, clearly, and once and for all." A hush fell over the room. Melissa stood near the entryway, her smile frozen, her body rigid. I reached into a drawer by the fireplace and pulled out a thick folder. "This," I said, placing it on the mantel, "contains every bank transaction from the last year. It includes proof of forged signatures, unauthorized withdrawals, and a power of attorney I never knowingly signed. It also includes medical records from an independent physician, Dr. Lillian Fry at Boston General, confirming that I have no signs of cognitive decline. I passed every evaluation, my memory, judgment, reasoning, all intact." I looked around. In fact, I'm probably the most lucid I've been in years. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. This folder also contains email transcripts between Melissa and a neurologist named Dr. Camden, an individual under investigation for falsifying dementia diagnoses in exchange for payment. I turned toward Melissa, who was now visibly trembling. "He was promised $15,000 for a diagnosis that would render me incapable of managing my estate. Melissa, would you like to explain that to the guests?" This is insane," she stammered, stepping backwards. "You're confused, Helen. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You underestimated me. That was your first mistake. You thought age made me weak, that trust made me naive. You thought I'd go quietly. That was your second mistake." Brian stood frozen near the kitchen, looking as if he might collapse. I turned to Lena. "Would you please share what you witnessed?" Lena nodded nervously and stepped forward. I saw Melissa taking pictures of Mrs. Grander's documents. When I asked her, she said it was for organizing, but she was deleting some of the files too. I knew it wasn't right." Robert moved to the center of the room. "As Mrs. Grander's attorney, I have filed a formal complaint with the Elder Protection Unit. Investigators are already reviewing the financial records and Dr. Camden's medical fraud. There will be consequences." "You can't prove anything," she shrieked, voice cracking. This is a setup. She's senile. Actually, said Julian calmly from the side, we can prove everything. You've documented your own fraud across multiple platforms. Your emails, your browser history, the bank trail, the payments you promised, even the medications you gave Helen, analyzed and confirmed to be sedatives in excessive doses. We have it all. Brian finally spoke. Mrs.? Is that true? You you drugged her? I did it for us, she cried, the facade finally collapsing. Do you know how close we were to losing everything? You didn't care. You sat around pretending it would all be fine while the creditors threatened to take our home. I did what I had to do. By destroying my mother? By turning me against her? Melissa turned, wild-eyed, toward the door. You're all insane. She's manipulating you. She's just an old witch with a law degree and a grudge. Correction, I said coolly. I am a retired senior litigation partner with decades of courtroom experience and a reputation for never losing. The room was silent except for the sound of a wine glass being quietly placed on a table. Melissa rushed toward the hallway, but two plainclothes officers stepped into her path. Melissa Granger, one of them said, we have a warrant for your arrest. You're being charged with elder abuse, attempted fraud, falsification of medical records, and conspiracy to commit financial theft. No, she shrieked. No, you can't do this. We're not doing this, the officer said. You did it to yourself. As they led her out, she thrashed and screamed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt utterly calm. The woman who had tried to steal everything from me had underestimated one thing: how deeply I valued my name, my freedom, and my legacy, and how far I was willing to go to protect them. That night, after the last guest had gone and the silence returned, Brian sat beside me at the kitchen table, pale and shaking. He whispered, I didn't know, Mom. I didn't know any of this. I replied, softly but firmly, you didn't want to know. You believed someone else's story about your own mother because it was easier than asking me directly. He lowered his head into his hands, and I saw the shame wash over him. I failed you. No, I said. You were lied to. But now you have a choice: to stay in the lie or build something better from the truth. What happens next is up to you. He looked up, eyes full of tears. I want to fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. And for the first time in months, I believed him, because the truth had finally come to light. And I wasn't finished yet. The following morning, Brian was still there. He hadn't slept, hadn't left my side. The kitchen felt unfamiliar in its quietness, as if the house itself was recovering from Melissa's storm. He brewed coffee without speaking, eyes hollow, movements slow. She started months ago, he finally said. Little things. She'd tell me you forgot appointments, repeated stories, made errors in your accounts. I didn't want to believe it, but she showed me notes, email exchanges with your bank. I thought... He trailed off. You thought you were protecting me, I finished for him. But you never asked me directly. You let her speak for me. I was scared, he admitted. The idea of you slipping away like that, it was easier to think we were catching it early, that we were helping you. I reached across the table and rested my hand over his. We all want to protect the people we love, but love doesn't survive on assumptions. It needs truth, even when it's uncomfortable. His face crumpled, and he nodded. I don't know how to undo what I allowed. You start by showing up. You already have. That afternoon, Julian arrived with an update that turned my stomach. Melissa had siphoned over $100,000 from both my personal savings and Brian's business accounts. She'd falsified invoices, rerouted investment deposits, and even secured a second mortgage on their home without Brian's knowledge. The trail is airtight, Julian said. It's enough to send her away for over a decade. And there's more. She researched pharmacological methods to simulate cognitive decline in seniors. This was premeditated, Helen. She didn't just stumble into desperation. She built a system designed to break you. She nearly did, I admitted. But that was her final miscalculation. I was never as broken as I let her believe. Julian handed me a separate envelope. This just came in from the state lab. The pills she substituted were laced with compounds that, over time, would cause confusion, disorientation, even hallucinations. A few more weeks, and you might have genuinely started forgetting things. It wasn't just about convincing others you were sick. She was making sure it became real. I swallowed hard. My hands trembled for a moment before I steadied them. She wanted to erase me, I whispered, piece by piece. But you outplayed her, Julian said, and because you did, we can now prove her pattern. Melissa has done this before, just not on this scale. She has other victims? I asked, stunned. Julian nodded. 2 others. Elderly women in her previous community. Similar methods. One passed away, the other lost her home. Melissa disappeared before authorities connected the dots, changed her last name, and resurfaced here. We believe she targeted Brian precisely because of your financial standing. She married my son to get to me, I said, the words heavy in my mouth. Yes, Julian said. And when that wasn't enough, she tried to dismantle who you were from the inside out. That evening, Tommy stopped by. My grandson had been quiet through all of this, but when he stepped into the kitchen and saw me making tea, he smiled with relief. You're okay. You really are okay. I told you, didn't I? I smiled. You knew. I did, he said, pulling out a chair. But it was hard to argue with Mom when she kept saying you were sick. She even told my teacher once that you'd gotten your days mixed up, that you thought it was Christmas in May. That never happened. I know, he replied. That's when I stopped believing her. Tommy, I said gently, there's something I need you to hear, something important. Melissa, she's not your biological mother. He blinked. I don't understand. Your real mother, her name was Janet. She died when you were a toddler. Brian met Melissa after. She wanted to be seen as your mother so badly, she rewrote the past. But I have the documents, the adoption records, the dates. You and Lisa were both adopted after the marriage. His eyes filled with tears. She lied about everything, didn't she? Yes, I said, but the truth matters more than the lies, and you have a right to know it. Does Lisa know? Not yet. I want to tell her myself when the time is right. Tommy nodded, then leaned forward. Grandma, are you still in danger? Not anymore, I said. Melissa's facing charges. She's been removed from the house. But things take time, and court cases move slowly. That's why I need you to keep your eyes open. Watch, listen, trust your instincts. If anything feels wrong, speak up. I will. I promise. Later that night, I sat in the quiet of the living room, the grandfather clock ticking softly behind me. The house felt different, lighter, though the shadows of what had happened still lingered in the corners. I picked up the phone and called Robert. We need to finalize the estate restructuring. Melissa's name needs to be scrubbed from everything, and I want Lisa and Tommy protected no matter what. Understood, he said. But there's more. Are you sitting down? Go ahead. Melissa kept extensive files, not just bank records and medical notes, but journals, logs of your routines, social contacts, legal vulnerabilities. We found them during the search of her apartment. So she'd been planning this even before Brian proposed? Exactly. She targeted you deliberately from day one. I didn't respond right away. The weight of it pressed down on me like wet concrete. What kind of person spends years constructing a lie like that? The kind that thinks manipulation is easier than earning a life. But that's behind us now, and you've already begun rebuilding what matters. The next morning, I found Lisa in the garden. She was kneeling in the soil, hands dirty, sleeves rolled up. She looked up when she heard my steps. "I wanted to plant something," she said softly. "Something new." "That's a beautiful idea," I replied. We worked side by side, and after a few minutes, she said, "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Are you angry all the time now?" I looked at her, surprised by the question. "Why do you ask?" "Because I would be. I keep thinking if I'd noticed earlier, if I'd asked more questions." "Sweetheart," I brushed soil from her knuckles, "being angry is like carrying poison, hoping someone else will drink it. I'm not angry anymore. I'm awake. There's a difference." She nodded slowly. "I want to be awake too." I smiled. "You already are." That night, for the first time in over a year, I slept through the night without locking my door. The house was mine again. My peace was mine again. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like someone's victim. I felt like myself. And I knew now that version of me was more dangerous, more prepared, and more determined than ever. Melissa had tried to silence me, but I had found my voice. And I intended to use it. The following week brought a mixture of stillness and momentum. The house had quieted, but my world had begun to move again. Julian's team was working tirelessly. Subpoenas were issued, depositions scheduled. Melissa's lawyer reached out twice through intermediaries, both times suggesting a settlement to avoid public embarrassment. I didn't even dignify it with a response. Let her be embarrassed. Let her feel the sharp edge of consequence for the first time in her life. Meanwhile, Brian had begun the painful process of untangling his finances. Julian helped him identify every account Melissa had accessed, some under aliases, some using forged authorization. She had sold off small assets, refinanced debts under his name, and opened 2 credit cards linked to his business EIN. "She was setting me up to take the fall," he said, staring at the spreadsheet Robert had prepared. "If this hadn't come to light, I would have been the one investigated." "You still might be," Julian replied carefully. "But your cooperation and your mother's testimony will go a long way toward protecting you." I watched Brian's face change in real time. Anger, shame, grief. "She used me to hurt you," he whispered. "And I helped her. God help me, I helped her." "You were manipulated," I said quietly. "But you're not the only one." Julian laid down a document on the table. "This just came in. Melissa used an online identity to contact a medical billing company and request fraudulent invoices for services she claimed were provided to you. Therapy sessions, in-home evaluations, equipment rentals. These bills were then submitted to your insurance under your name." "That's insurance fraud. Federal." "Correct," Julian said. "She's going to face a mountain of charges, and we now have full digital evidence to back every one of them." That night, I sat on the porch with Lisa and Tommy. The air was cool, the trees beginning to change with the season. "Are you afraid?" Lisa asked suddenly. "Afraid of what's coming next?" "No," I said honestly. "The worst already happened. I was betrayed by someone I trusted. Everything after that is just paperwork." "You're brave," Tommy said. "No," I replied. "I'm prepared. There's a difference." The next morning, I received a call from the Attorney General's office. "Mrs. Granger," the voice said, Thank you for your cooperation. We've reviewed all submitted evidence and are moving forward with prosecution. The charges include elder abuse, financial fraud, attempted medical manipulation, and conspiracy to commit identity theft. The maximum sentence, if convicted, could exceed 15 years. That's more than fair, I said, my voice steady. We'll also be pursuing charges against Dr. Camden for his role. He's been suspended pending further investigation. We've received 2 more complaints since your case began. He's done this before, I said. It needs to end. It will. A week later, I was invited to speak at a community forum on elder financial abuse. Robert introduced me to the organizers, attorneys, advocates, and caregivers from across the state. I was hesitant at first. I hadn't seen myself as a speaker in years. But standing in front of that crowd, I felt something rise in me. Something I hadn't realized I missed. Purpose. I told them everything. Not just about Melissa, but about the warning signs, the slow erosion of trust, the gaslighting, the patronizing tone, the way manipulative people use love as leverage. And I watched their faces change. The knowing looks, the scribbled notes, the quiet nods. Some of them had lived it. Some of them were living it now. Afterward, a woman in her 60s approached me. My daughter-in-law has been handling my finances since my stroke. She's wonderful, but lately she's been telling me I forgot things I'm sure I didn't. I thought I was losing my mind. You're not, I said gently. Start writing everything down. Dates, times, words. Patterns will show themselves if something's wrong. And when you're ready, I'll help you. She took my hand. Thank you. You gave me hope. That night, back at home, I added a new section to my file cabinet. Advocacy. It included contacts, resources, forms, and legal protections for the elderly, because this wasn't just my fight anymore. The storm had passed, but the mission had begun. Over the following weeks, Brian stepped up more than I could have imagined. He started attending therapy, working through the psychological hold Melissa had on him. It wasn't just that she lied. It's that she made me feel like protecting her was protecting my family. She twisted everything. Abusers often do, I said. They redefine loyalty to serve themselves. I want to rebuild our relationship, but I know it's going to take time. Time I'm willing to give, as long as you meet me in the work. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I will. Lisa, too, had changed. She spent more time at home, helping with chores, studying at the kitchen table. She asked thoughtful questions about what had happened, about how to tell the difference between concern and control. You never made me feel small, she said one day, even when I was little. But Melissa always made me feel like I owed her for everything. Because she was insecure, I told her. People who need to control others are terrified of being irrelevant. Well, she's irrelevant now, Lisa said, with a quiet fierceness that made me smile. As the holidays approached, the house felt alive again. We decorated together, cooked together, laughed in ways I thought had been lost. And through it all, I continued building something new. I consulted with local lawmakers about elder protection bills. I helped draft language for a grant supporting free legal clinics for seniors. I even partnered with Robert and Julian to launch a helpline for financial abuse victims. And then one day the phone rang. Mrs. Granger? A soft voice said. My name is Frank Whitmore. I read about you in the paper. My son and daughter-in-law are trying to put me in a home. They say I'm confused, but I'm not. They've started transferring my accounts. I don't know what to do. You did the right thing by calling me. Now let's figure out what to do next. That call turned into 3 more that week, then 7 the next, and soon I was spending my mornings reviewing documents, making referrals, and showing people exactly how to fight back. Because when you shine a light in the right place, even the deepest deception begins to wither. Melissa taught me that. Not by breaking me, but by giving me a reason to rise. I'd lived a full life before her, a long and successful legal career. But I'd never realized just how much fight I still had left until someone tried to take it away. And now that I had it back, I planned to use it every day. Not just to protect myself, but to protect the people who hadn't been heard yet. Because silence is the soil where abuse grows. And I was done being silent. By early spring, the courtroom hearings began in earnest. I sat on the witness stand under oath, looking directly at the woman who had once sat at my kitchen table pretending to care about my blood pressure. Melissa wore a beige suit and a mask of composure, but I could see the cracks forming. Her eyes twitched at the corners, her mouth too tight, her posture coiled like a spring. Her attorney tried to frame her actions as concern, a misguided attempt to secure the financial safety of the household, he said. But the evidence spoke louder than any rehearsed defense. Every unauthorized transaction, every falsified medical report, every text exchange and email thread, documented and authenticated. Mrs. Granger, the prosecution asked during my testimony, when did you first suspect that your daughter-in-law was attempting to manipulate your medical diagnosis for financial gain? The moment I heard her say, "She's too old to know how much money she has," I answered. And when my son agreed with her, I knew I had to act carefully. If I had spoken out too soon, they would have buried me in confusion and fabricated concern. So I played the part of the fading widow. I gave them just enough rope to hang themselves. There were murmurs in the courtroom. Melissa's shoulders tightened. Brian sat behind me, his hands knotted together in his lap, expression full of remorse. But this wasn't about guilt anymore. This was about resolution, about setting the record straight. Melissa took the stand 2 days later. Her voice was calm at first, poised even. She cried at strategic moments, painted herself as a desperate wife drowning in debt and fear. "I was overwhelmed," she said. "Brian didn't know how bad things had gotten. I was trying to fix it on my own. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I thought Helen needed help." The prosecutor leaned forward. "Is that why you paid a known medical fraud to fabricate a dementia diagnosis? Why you gave Mrs. Granger sedatives to mimic cognitive decline? Why you took photos of her private documents and siphoned nearly $100,000 from her accounts?" Melissa's eyes darted toward the jury. I made mistakes, but I didn't try to poison her." "The lab results say otherwise. So does the bank trail, and so does your email to Dr. Camden stating, 'Timeline urgent, must create documented cognitive decline within 30 days. The jury didn't need any more convincing. After 3 days of deliberation, the verdict came down. Guilty on all charges. Elder abuse, financial fraud, attempted medical manipulation, identity theft, insurance fraud, conspiracy. The judge was firm, emotionless. "You preyed on a vulnerable individual you were meant to support. The court sees this as a grave violation of both trust and law. I hereby sentence you to 12 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole before serving 8. Melissa didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply blinked, as if the world had finally caught up to her. Brian held my hand as the gavel came down. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I let her twist everything. I didn't protect you." "You're protecting me now. That matters more." A week later, Dr. Camden received his sentence. 6 years and permanent revocation of his medical license. The state board moved swiftly, citing 3 other cases uncovered during the investigation. Julian was there at the hearing. He handed me a copy of the final report. "It's done," he said. "You exposed them both. Cleanly, publicly, permanently." I took the folder, but my hands didn't tremble. Not anymore. Good. Then we move forward. At home, life found its rhythm again. Lisa started tutoring younger students, finding a sense of purpose she hadn't known she needed. Tommy applied to a pre-law program at Northeastern. "I want to help people like you did," he told me. "People who get cornered and don't know how to fight back." Then remember this, I said. Truth takes time, justice takes planning, but neither ever really disappears. They wait for the right person to uncover them. That spring, I received a letter from the Massachusetts Bar Association. They invited me to speak at their annual summit on the topic of elder justice. At first, I hesitated. I was retired. I had given my years, my energy, my life to that world. But then I thought about all the people who still had no idea what was being done to them behind closed doors, who had no legal degree, no Julian, no Robert, no witnesses. They needed someone who had survived it, someone who had taken the long road back from betrayal. I'd be honored, I wrote in reply. The summit was held at the old Boston Convention Center. I stood in front of nearly 500 lawyers, judges, and advocates and told them the truth. Not just my story, but the stories of people I had begun helping since the trial ended. Abuse, I said, doesn't always wear a villain's mask. Sometimes it speaks in a kind voice. Sometimes it says it loves you. Sometimes it's family. And that's exactly why it's so dangerous. When I finished, the room rose in quiet applause. It wasn't thunderous, but it was full, genuine. People came up to me after, asking for guidance, for resources, for a way to do more. And I gave them everything I had, because knowledge is power, and I wasn't hoarding it anymore. That evening, back home, Brian sat on a porch with a notebook full of budgeting notes. "I'm rebuilding from scratch," he said. "I lost the business. Melissa drained every corner I didn't see." "But you're standing," I replied, "and you're honest about it. That's more than most can say." "I'm thinking of starting a service business. Handyman work, maybe consulting for small companies. Nothing fancy." "That sounds perfect," I said. "Keep it simple. Keep it yours." He looked at me for a long moment. "I don't deserve your support after everything." "You don't need to deserve it," I said. "You just need to accept it and not waste it." Lisa joined us a few minutes later, and for a while we just sat in the golden light, watching the shadows move across the lawn. It was quiet. No pretending, no games. Just healing. One night, Julian called. "I've got a case in upstate New York. Woman in her 80s, same story. Family trying to prove she's incompetent. You up for a road trip?" I smiled. "Send me the files, I'll read them tonight." "You never stop, do you?" he laughed. "Not until they do. And they never do. Because when you survive something like this, it doesn't leave you. It becomes a fire in your bones, a mission stitched into your breath." Melissa thought she was ending my story. What she didn't realize was that she lit the beginning of something far more powerful, and I intended to keep it burning for as long as I had breath to fight. A month after Melissa's sentencing, I received a letter from a woman named Nora Caldwell. It was handwritten, the envelope creased and worn, the return address from a small town in northern Vermont. "Dear Mrs. Granger," it began. "I don't know how to say this except plainly. Your story saved my life. My daughter and her husband convinced me to sign over my power of attorney. They said it was temporary, just to handle my accounts while I was recovering from a fall. That was 6 months ago. Since then, they've sold my car, disconnected my phone, and told my friends I was in a memory care facility. I saw your interview on the local news. I recognize the tactics. I'm writing to ask, how do I get my life back?" I read her words 3 times before calling Robert. "We need a larger team," I told him. "It's not just a clinic anymore. It's a movement." "Already ahead of you," he replied. "I've been in touch with the state bar. They're interested in funding a pilot program modeled on your case. Free legal aid for elders facing familial exploitation." "And the name?" I asked. "The Granger Initiative," he said. "It's what everyone's calling it already." I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the place on my kitchen wall where the family photo used to hang, the one with Melissa, smiling so wide. I had removed it weeks ago. That space stayed empty. It reminded me that sometimes removing the toxic thing creates room for light. By summer, the Granger Initiative had expanded into 3 counties. We had volunteer attorneys, social workers, and investigators ready to respond to calls like Nora's. And they were pouring in. Connecticut, New Hampshire, Rhode Island. The stories were eerily similar. Sons, daughters, in-laws, grandchildren, slowly taking over, cloaked in the language of concern. Most of the victims were too embarrassed to come forward at first. I should have seen it. I should have known. You're not alone, I would tell them. You're not stupid. You're trusting. There's a difference. Meanwhile, at home, life settled into a new normal. Brian found steady work consulting for small businesses. He started teaching a class at the community college, sharing his cautionary tale with aspiring entrepreneurs. Trust is a business decision, he told them. Make it wisely. Tommy visited often, always with new questions about law and justice. "Do you think I'd make a good lawyer, Grandma?" he asked one day as we sat in the backyard. "It depends," I said, handing him a glass of lemonade. "Do you care more about winning or about being right?" He thought for a moment. "Being right, but I want to win doing it." "Then you'll be a great one," I smiled. Lisa, now in her senior year of high school, had started a mentorship program for students who'd lost parents. "I think it's time we talk about what Melissa really was," she told me one evening. "Not just a liar. She was controlling, manipulative, and I let her make me feel small. She had power over you because she needed to. She saw your light and wanted to dim it. That's how weak people operate." "I don't want to be weak," Lisa said. "Then don't be," I told her. "Tell your story. Use it to help others. That's how we reclaim our strength." She nodded, eyes fierce. "I'm ready." One weekend, we hosted a small gathering at the house. Nothing elaborate, just close friends, a few colleagues from the initiative, and some of the people we'd helped. Nora Caldwell was there, her hair freshly cut, her smile full and strong. "I never thought I'd feel free again," she told me, hugging me tightly. "You gave that to me." "I gave it to yourself," I said. "I just reminded you how." During the gathering, I stood at the front of the living room, just like I had the night I exposed Melissa. But this time, it was different. When someone you love turns on you, it doesn't just break your heart. It rearranges it. It rewrites how you trust, how you listen, and how you define safety. But betrayal doesn't get to be the end of your story. You do. The room was silent, listening. I used to think getting older meant getting smaller, shrinking into the background, becoming irrelevant. But now I know better. Age sharpens you. It tempers you. It teaches you how to be precise with your love and ruthless with your boundaries. If anyone here has ever been told they're too old, too tired, too confused, let me tell you something. Those words are weapons used by people who fear your clarity. Don't let them dull you. Use what you know, and never, ever hand your power to someone who hasn't earned it. There were tears in the room. Some were mine. That night, Brian sat beside me on the porch and handed me a small box. "I found this while cleaning out the garage. Thought you should have it." Inside was an old photo of me and his father, taken when we first bought the house. I looked so young, so fierce. "He'd be proud of you. You didn't let her destroy this family." I looked at him. She didn't destroy it because we chose to rebuild it. That's the difference between families that survive and those that don't. They choose each other, over and over. "And what about forgiveness?" he asked quietly. I took a long breath. Forgiveness is a door. But the person who hurt you doesn't get to walk through it until they've earned the key. You've started building that key, Brian. Keep going. He nodded, eyes glassy. "I will." The stars came out slowly. The air smelled of grass and cooling earth. For the first time in years, the night felt quiet in a way that had nothing to do with fear. It was peace, and I had earned it. Every second,
every scar, every breath.
The official launch of the Granger Initiative's permanent headquarters happened in late September, nearly a year after Melissa's first attempt to declare me legally incompetent. The building was modest, nestled in a converted library in Hartford, but it hummed with purpose. Inside were conference rooms for intake interviews, a digital archive of elder abuse cases, a hotline office staffed with trained volunteers, and a legal clinic where retired lawyers like me donated their time. I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony with Robert on one side and Lisa on the other, holding the oversized scissors with a hand steadier than ever. "You built something incredible," Robert said softly. "You turned pain into something that changes lives." "We built it," I corrected him. "All of us. Every person who said enough is enough." Reporters asked for sound bites, for quotes about justice, about aging, about why this work mattered. I gave them one sentence. "This isn't about getting old. It's about being underestimated." That afternoon, a young woman named Eliza approached me in the lobby. She looked no older than 30 and carried a stack of paperwork hugged to her chest. "I just wanted to thank you," she said. "My grandfather didn't know where to turn. He thought he was imagining things, that maybe he was confused. But he wasn't. And because of what you started, we have a lawyer and we have a case." I reached out and touched her hand. "Believe the ones who are forgotten," I said. "They often see everything." That evening, back home, Brian grilled chicken on the patio while Lisa and Tommy argued over the best way to plant fall flowers. They didn't know I was watching from the window, just taking them in. My family wasn't perfect. It never had been. But the lies were gone. The rot had been cut out. And in its place, something honest was growing. Tommy was applying to law school now, writing his admissions essay about the summer he spent watching his grandmother dismantle a criminal scheme. Lisa was preparing her final project for school, a campaign titled "Respect Has No Expiration Date," advocating for intergenerational trust and visibility. Even Brian had changed. The man who once let silence replace truth now spoke plainly, asked questions, showed up. "You okay?" he asked that night as he poured me tea. "You've been quiet." "I'm just thinking about what comes next." "Do you have to keep going?" he asked gently. "You've done so much." I looked at him. "Of course I have to keep going. There are more of them out there. And if I can stop even one person from going through what I did, it's worth it." He nodded. "I'll help however I can." I smiled. "You already are." Later that week, I received a formal invitation from the Department of Justice. They asked me to speak before Congress during Elder Justice Week, to share my story and help shape legislation expanding funding for protective services. "Are you ready for Washington?" Robert asked over the phone. "I think so, but they'd better be ready for me." The hearing was scheduled for October 14th. I wore a navy suit, the same color as the one I wore to court the day Melissa was sentenced. As I stood before the panel, cameras clicking, microphones waiting, I didn't feel nervous. I felt anchored. My name is Helen Granger, and I was almost erased by the people I loved most. But instead of vanishing, I decided to fight. And I learned something every American needs to hear. Aging does not make you helpless. Trust does not make you foolish. And silence is not the same as consent. I told them everything. The manipulation, the false diagnosis, the stolen money, the slow poisoning. I described the moment I realized no one was coming to save me and that I would have to become my own defense. When I finished, the room was still. One congresswoman dabbed her eyes, another nodded solemnly. "We thank you for your courage. You've given this chamber something we can't legislate: perspective." The next morning, my inbox was full. Letters from seniors, from their children, from caregivers, all wanting to help, to share, to ask. I answered everyone. That winter, Lisa and I baked gingerbread cookies in the kitchen, laughing as the dough stuck to our fingers. Grandma, do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't heard them that morning at the stairs? I paused. Sometimes, I think I would have figured it out eventually, but it would have taken longer, and the damage might have gone deeper. I might not have recovered. But you did. You didn't just survive, you rebuilt. That's what you do after fire. You don't try to go back to the same house. You build something stronger on top of the ashes. The following spring, we hosted a fundraiser for the initiative. More than 200 people attended. Some were clients, some were donors, some were survivors. Nora Caldwell gave the keynote speech. Her voice was clear, full of pride. We believed we were powerless until we saw someone who reminded us we weren't. I watched from the side, my chest tight. That was the full circle I hadn't expected. Not just justice, not just restoration, but inspiration. And then the final moment I hadn't prepared for. After the fundraiser, a young man approached me with a shy smile. "Mrs. Granger," he said, "I'm here with my mother. She's too shy to say this herself, but you helped her. You saved her. She was one court date away from losing everything. Now she's living independently again. She even joined a quilting club." "I'm glad," I said. "Tell her she deserves every thread of that new life." He hesitated. "My mother said you don't realize it yet, but you started a revolution." I smiled, gently shaking my head. "I didn't start a revolution. I just remembered who I was." Because that was the truth. Melissa tried to define me by my age, by my trust, by my silence. But I remembered. I remembered the woman who could cross-examine a room into stillness, who could outmaneuver a lie before it finished forming, who could spot a fraud in the way someone hesitated before answering. I remembered the woman who fought for others long before she ever had to fight for herself. And once I remembered, I refused to forget again. If you're still listening to my story, thank you. If you've been dismissed, doubted, underestimated, I see you. And if someone is trying to take from you what you've spent a lifetime building, remember this. Age isn't weakness. It's your weapon. Experience is your armor. And your silence, that ends the moment you say, "I know who I am." So raise your voice, reclaim your power. And if you ever need someone to walk with you into that courtroom, I'll be waiting. Because the long game isn't just about winning. It's about making sure no one ever tries to play you again. Subscribe, share your story in the comments, and don't let anyone decide your ending for you. You've still got pages left to write.